We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 53a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was discussing the line in the Mishnah which distinguishes between a case where the animal falls forward into the bore and where the animal falls backwards into the bore. And Rav understands that part of the Mishnah is to be taken literally. It means to say that the animal falls forward and therefore dies of the hevel. And falling backwards actually means falling backwards, and therefore the animal is not dying of the hevel, but as we will see, the animal is dying of the impact. V'zeh bor, both are talking about falling again into the pit. And Rav L'taime, the Gemara says Rav is understanding the Mishnah according to his reasoning. Diyama Rav bor shechayva olav Torah lahavlo v'lo lachavto, because Rav says that when the Torah says bor is chayiv, it's chayiv for the hevel, it's chayiv for the bad air in the bor, it's not chayiv for the impact. And as Rashi explains, v'zeh b'bor, both cases we're talking about falling into the bor, meaning it's either forward or backward. V'afilu hachiyashmin and masnisin to pater. In the case where the animal falls backwards, the Mishnah is saying pater. Hoel v'lo mehav lameis, because when it falls backwards, it's not dying from the hevel. Ela mechavta, rather it's dying from the impact. V'karka olam divnei rishus harabim hazikaso, it was just the earth of the rishus harabim the damage. It's not really the bor. And again, that's what Rav holds. He makes a distinction between hevel, between dying from the bad air, and between dying from the impact, and that's exactly the distinction the Mishnah is making according to Rav. And the Gemara continues with Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, Bebor, when it comes to actually falling into the pit, Bein milafanav, Bein milacharav chayiv. It doesn't matter if the animal falls forward or backwards, always going to be chayiv. Shmuel L'taime, Shmuel follows his reasoning, D'yamar lahavlo v'kol shekain lachavta, because he says that when it comes to the damages that a pit does, the person is responsible if the damage is through hevel, and certainly the person is responsible if the damage is through impact. And so therefore, in terms of that, there would be no distinction between milfanav and milacharav. And so the question is, what did the Mishnah mean when it talked about mila acharav pater? Elahechi da mila acharav. What does it mean la acharav mikol hakriya de pater? Again, the case in the Mishnah was that the person is making noise, he's digging in the bottom of the pit, and that somehow scares the animal. What does that mean? That in that case it's going to be pater? The case is as follows: Kagon de niskal babor. The case is that the animal tripped over the pit. V'nafal la'achore habor chutz labor. And the Mishnah just means that the animal actually tripped outside of the pit and was injured. That's the case where the person is actually pater. It didn't actually fall into the pit in the case of liacharav in the Mishnah. And we will note over here that in the Mishnah, the actual case is that the animal falls into the pit because of the noise of the person who is digging in the pit. Right now, the Gemara is not addressing that part of the Mishnah. The Gemara is only addressing the difference between falling forward and falling backwards. Again, according to Rav, the Mishnah literally means if the animal falls backwards and doesn't die of hevel, so then the owner of the bor is pater, because the bor is only chayiv due to hevel. And according to Shmuel, that's not the case. The animal falls forward or backward, it's the same thing, because you're chayiv on the impact as well. And when it says in the Mishnah the animal fell backwards, it means that the damage took place outside of the pit. In any case, the Gemara continues. Eitzvei, we have a question from the following brisa. It says in the brisa, "Bebor bein lefanav, bein laacharav chayiv." It says by a bor, it doesn't matter if it falls forward or backwards; it's always going to be chayiv. That seems exactly like Shmuel. You don't make a distinction between how the animal falls, because by bor you're chayiv both for the hevel and for the impact. And so the Gemara says to Yufta de Rav, let us suggest that this brisa is a refutation of Rav. Rav said that if the animal falls backwards and there's no hevel, it would be pater. And the Gemara answers to this. Amar of Chisda says, Moder Rav bebor b'reshuso dechayiv. Rav would admit that, let's say you have a bor, the person has a bor in his own reshus, then he would be chayiv even if it falls backwards, because then you're chayiv even on impact. Mishum do amar le, because then he could say to him, either way we look at it, iba havla mis havla didachu. If my animal died because of the hevel of the bor, that's your hevel. You, the owner of the bor, are responsible. And iba chavta mis, and if my animal died because of the impact, so chavta didachu, that's also you're also causing the impact, because here the bor was in your own property. And essentially, Rav only said his halacha that the responsibility of bor is only by hevel. That's only true in Rishus Harabim. But if it's a bor b'reshus, so Rav would admit to Shmuel's position, and that's what the Brisa is talking about. That's the answer of Rav Chisda on behalf of Rav for the Brisa. And the Gemara continues, Rabba Amar Rabba says another answer for the Brisa. Here in the Brisa, what are we talking about? B'mishapech, where the animal is essentially turning over. The nafal ape, it really does fall on its face, it falls forward. V'ishapech v'nafal agabe, and then it turns over and falls on its back. The havla dahani be'ahani, because the hevel that the animal already had, it was exposed to, that already helped in order to kill the animal, and therefore it really is is hevel, even in that case as well. That's the second answer to understand the brisa. When the brisa says la'achrav chayev, it's talking about where the animal actually initially did fall face forward and then turned over. And the Gemara continues, Rav Yosef says a third answer to understand the brisa according to Rav, hacha benizke bor b'shor askin. And this brisa is actually not talking about the ox getting damaged by the boar. It's actually talking the other way around. The boar is actually getting damaged by the ox, and that's what it's saying. It's saying it doesn't matter how the ox falls. What kind of damage are we talking about? Shehivish es meimav. We're talking about a situation where the shore falls into the pit and ruins the water, and in that situation, deloshna lafanav veloshna lachrav. It doesn't matter if it falls forward or backward. Mechayev, in that case, the owner of the shore is going to be chayev for ruining the water that is inside the pit. And Rashi explains, Hacha benizke bor b'shor. Here we're talking about a situation again where the boar is damaged by the shore. Sha'ashor nichnas l'chatzer balabayis shelo b'reshus. The shore entered the courtyard of the balabayis with no permission. V'lo hefker lo reshusa v'lo boru. The case is that the owner of the reshus, he did not make his property hefker. He didn't make the boar hefker. The animal should not have been there at all. V'nafa labor v'hivish es meimav. And then the shore fell into the pit and contaminated the water. That's actually the case in the brisa, and that would not be a question on Rav at all. And the Gemara continues, Tani Rav Chananya l'siyue l'Rav. Rav Chananya taught the following support of Rav. It says, V'nafal at she'ipol derech nefila. It says that the animal falls in. It has to be the normal way of falling. Mikan amru. From here they say, Nafal lefanav mikol hakriya chayev. If from the sound of the digging the animal falls forward, then the owner of the pit is chayev. Liachra mikol hakriya. But if it falls backward from the sound of the digging, pater. So in that case it's pater. V'zev bebor. And this is both true by the boar. This is exactly what Rav says. Again, Rav does make that distinction between falling forward and falling backward. And now the Gemara continues and addresses the issue of the sound of the digging. Amar Mar, the master said, Nafa lefanav mikol hakriya chayev. It says if the animal falls forward into the pit because of the sound that's going on in the pit of the digging, so then the owner of the boar is chayev. And so the Gemara says, V'yamai, why is that the case? Name a kora garamle. Why don't we say that the person doing the digging actually scared the animal and caused it to fall, and therefore he should be the one responsible, and as we'll see in Rashi in a moment, he's not going to have to pay because that's just considered to be grama, that's considered indirect, but then at least we should say that the balabor does not have to pay. It's really the fault of the person digging. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Shimi Barashi. Rav Shimi Barashi says, Hamani Rabbi Nasani. Who is the author of this halacha? It's Rabbi Nasan. The Amar Bal Habor Hazeka Ka'avid, because he says that the owner of the pit did in fact cause the damage. And anytime you have a situation where you can't collect from one party that caused the damage, mishtale mehai. So then you have to collect from the other person that caused the damage. Meaning in this case, you can't collect from the person who's making the noise. That's considered indirect, and therefore you do collect from the Baal Habor. That's the explanation of this halacha. And the Gemara continues, Detanya, as we learned in the Brisa, shor shedachaf es chaveru labor. Let's say a shore pushes another shore into a bor. So now you have this partnership in causing the damage. Baal hashor chayiv, Baal Habor pater. So the Tanna Kamma, the Brisa says that the owner of the shore is chayiv and the owner of the bor is pater. Rabbi Nasan Omer, Rabbi Nasan says, Baal hashor mishalim mechza. The owner of the shore pays half. U'Baal Habor mishalim mechza. And the owner of the bor also pays half. You see that Rabbi Nasan says that they both share in the responsibility. And the Gemara notes, Vatanya, but then we learn in a Brisa, Rabbi Nasan Omer, Baal Habor mishalim gimel chalakim, that it says actually, according to Rabbi Nasan, the Baal Habor pays 3/4 of the damage. U'Baal hashor revi, and the Baal hashor only pays 1/4 of the damage. So how come in one version of Rabbi Nasan we have it that they split it 50-50, and in the other version of Rabbi Nasan we have it that they split it, that one does 3/4 and one does 1/4? And the Gemara answers to that, lo kasha, that's not difficult. Ha-betam, ha-bemuad, it depends what we're talking about, if we're talking about a tam or a muad. If we're talking about a muad, so then there's a full responsibility of the owner of the shore, so then you divide it 50-50. But if you're talking about a tam, where the shore is only responsible anyhow, chatzi nezek, so then you divide it, that's 3/4 and 1/4. And we'll take a look at Rashi over here, nafa lefanav mikol hakriya chayiv. Again, it said if the animal falls forward because of the sound of the digging, so then the Baal Habor is chayiv. And the Gemara asked, V'amai name a kora garmle, why is that the case? Why don't we say that the sound of the digging, the person doing the digging, is really the cause? The kora pater, now that person is actually pater who? The grama bialmu, because that's just considered grama, it's indirect. Uchashein hakora Baal Habor askinan, and Rashi points out, we're talking about a situation where the person doing the digging is not actually the owner of the bor. Elashu sechir, rather he's hired. Ukagon shais a bor kruya vomedis, and the bor was already there before he got there. Kodem lachein, the bor was already there before he started digging. The high karya have a kora chayiv. Now, if the person doing the digging now is the one who made the pit, then he certainly would be chayiv. Dein shliach lidvar avera. There's no shliach for a dvar avera. You can't say that if he's digging on someone else's behalf, therefore that other person is chayiv. That's not true. It's always the person who's doing the avera who's chayiv, the person digging, the aser lekalkel rishus harabim. It's certainly considered an avera. It's aser to rune rishus harabim. And Rashi continues that the Gemara answered, we're following Rabbi Nassan, and Baal Habor Hazeka Avid, it's the owner of the pit that did the damage, Kolomer Besoch Shalo Nimsa Hanezik, meaning to say that the damage happened in his bore, and if we're not able to collect from the person doing the digging who frightened the animal, to kol grama bialmu, because again the kol is just considered indirect, Mishtalim Minei the Baal Habor, so then instead you collect from the Baal Habor. Baal Habor Potter, again according to the Tana Kamma, if you have a case where the shore pushed the other shore into the pit, so according to the Tana Kamma, the Baal Hashor is chayiv and the Baal Habor is potter. Bein sha'ashor hanizik shota, bein shu pikech. It doesn't matter what happened in terms of the shore that was damaged, whether that shore didn't know what it was doing or whether it was an intelligent shore. The Amrle Baal Habor, because the Baal Habor can say, ilav torcha lo nafal, if not for your shore pushing this shore into my pit, it wouldn't have fell. V'hai dechifa ma'isa biyadayim havoy v'lo grumman. This is an active type of damage. It's not considered grumma. It's not considered to be indirect, like the case of the person causing the noise, doing the digging, and that's why the Tana Kamma says the Baal Hashor pays and the Baal Habor is potter. But then Rabbi Nassan says Baal Habor meshali mechsa, that the Baal Habor pays half. Sharei ben shneim hemisu. The point is they both contributed to the damage. Afilu have a shore hanizik pikeach, and even if the shore that was damaged was an intelligent shore, chayiv is still chayiv. The lekol memori boy loch iyune umezel the chaver dachva. The person who owned the pit can't say that the shore should have looked where it was going because it got pushed in, and so therefore again that's why according to Rabbi Nassan they split it. And then the Gemara said that there's another version of Rabbi Nassan that the Baal Habor pays 3/4 and the Baal Hashor pays 1/4. And the Gemara answered, it depends if we're talking about a tam or a muad. Rashi says, ha betam Baal Hashor mishalim revia. By a tam, the owner of the shore only pays 1/4. V'taim mefarish l'kamei. That we're going to explain later on as we continue. And ha b'muad, but when we're talking about a muad, so then everyone pays half. The mechayev nezek sholem. The muad's obviously chayev nezek sholem. So then if they're both contributing to the damage, the Baal Hashor and the Baal Habor, so then they each pay 50%. The chol chad mishalem mechza. Each one pays half. Mimonav shach. That's mimonav shach. Itar vayu kula hezek of it. If you consider that each one did the entire damage, dal yedei chad minayu mais, that we can attribute it all, the death, all of it to one of them. Hashda da'av the itar vayu mishalem kol chad palga. But now that they did it together, they all can pay half. Ikol chad v'chad palga hezek of it. And if you're going to say that each one did half of the damage, my david mishalem. So then each one pays whatever they did. The hamud, because we're talking about a muad. And the Gemara now continues and analyzes this idea that by a tam, that the owner of the shore is going to pay 1/4 and the owner of the bore is going to pay 3/4. And so the Gemara says, Uvetam ma'ikosavar. If we're talking about the case of a tam, what exactly do we hold in terms of this damage? Ikosavar haikula hezeko avid v'haikula hezeko avid. Now, if we hold that the entire damage was really done by the shore and the entire damage also was really done by the bore, so then hai mishalim palga v'hai mishalim palga. Then actually each one should pay half. The owner of the shore should pay half because a tam in general does pay half, and really we're considering like the tam did the entire damage, the tam actually did, and pays chatzi nezek, and then the Baal Habor also did the entire damage and should pay the other half. It shouldn't be 3/4 and 1/4, it should be half and half, so it can't be that that's what's going on. V'ika savar, and if Rabbi Nassan holds, hai palga hezeko avid, that each one did half of the damage, so the shore did half of the damage, v'hai palga hezeko avid, and the other one, the bore, also did half of the damage, so then what should happen is as follows. Baal Habor mishalim palga, the owner of the bore should pay half because it did 50% of the damage. Ubal hashor, and then the owner of the shore, which did 50% of the damage, but then only pays chatzi nezek, that should be revia, that should pay only 1/4. The idach riva mafsid, and the other quarter should be lost. It shouldn't be 3/4 and 1/4. It should be a half and 1/4. So how is it that Rabbi Nassan comes out by a tam that the payment is going to be 3/4 from the Baal Habor and is going to be 1/4 from the Baal Hashor? And the Gemara answers to that. Amar Rava says, Rabbi Nassan dainahu. Rabbi Nassan was a judge. V'nachis le'umka dedina, and he went down to the depths of the halacha and explained it as follows: Liolam kasavar haikula hezeko avid v'haikula hezeko avid. Really, Rabbi Nassan holds that each one did the entire damage. The shore is considered to have done and is responsible for the whole damage of the shore that fell in the pit, and the owner of the pit is also responsible for the entire damage. Now, according to that, we said that it should have been 50-50. Each one should pay 50%. And that which you had a question that let the owner of the bore pay pay half and let the owner of the shore pay half. Mishum do amar le bal hashor le bal habor. The reason is because the owner of the shore can say to the owner of the bor, Shutfusoi maya hanyali. What is my partnership? What's it helping me at all? In other words, we are in fact partners in some way, and if we're partners in some way, so there should be some splitting. And what does it mean splitting? If the most I even have to pay, if the most I ever have to pay is 50%, so there should be a partnership here, and now we should split that, and therefore I should only pay a quarter. And again, we're partners at 50%, so you should have to pay half of what I would normally have to pay. That's how Rabbi Nassan understands that the Baal Habor pays 3/4 and the Baal Hashor pays 1/4. And the Gemara continues, if you want, I could say another answer. Liolam Kasavar could be that really Rabbi Nassan holds Haipalga Hezek Ovid, Vahaipalga Hezek Ovid, that each one did 50% of the damage. And again, the question according to that was Udukakashalach, and then you asked on that version, Baal Habor Meshalim Palga, then the owner of the board should only pay half. Ubal Hashor Meshalim Revia, and the Baal Hashor should pay a quarter, because again he pays half of the half. The Idach Riva Nafsin, and the other quarter should be lost. And so the Gemara explains that's not the case. Mishum do Amar le Baal Hashor le Baal Habor, because the owner of the shore can say to the Baal Habor, Anoto roi bebirach ashkechite. My ox was found, this is talking about the Baal Hashor, the one who owns the shore that was damaged. My ox was found in your bor. Ad ketalte, so therefore you're responsible for killing my shore. My deisli lishtalum mehech mishtalamna. Whatever I can get from the other guy, the Baal Hashor, I'll take from the other guy. And the most I can get from the other guy is going to be a quarter, because again we're saying each one did 50% of the damage. The most I can get from him is 1/4. But however, my delesli whatever I can't get from the Baal Hashor, from the shore that pushed my shore into the bor, mishtalamna mimech, I have a right to collect from you, and that's why I have a right to collect 3/4 from you, because at the end of the day, the shore was found in your pit. And Rashi explains in the first answer of the Gemara, according to Rabbi Nassan, Shutfusoi Mayahanyali, the person who is the Baal Hashor, he can say, what does my partnership help if I'm paying half? Belav Shutfus Nami Palgud Mishal Amna. I would have paid half, I would have paid 50%, even without the partnership. V'kevan the Baal Habor Nami Kula Hezek Oven, and since according to this answer, everybody did the entire damage, the Baal Habor did the entire thing, and the Baal Hashor, Mishalam Gimel Chalokim. So therefore the Baal Habor has to actually pay 3/4, and again the Baal Hashor pays 1/4. And then the Gemara said in the second answer, my deisli, again according to Rabbi Nassan, whatever I can collect from the Baal Hashor, I'll collect from the Baal Hashor, but at the end of the day, my shore was found in your pit, so you have to cover the rest. Avol Rabbanan, and now Rashi notes, what do the Rabbanan hold? Because the Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi Nassan, and they say on the contrary, they say the Baal Hashor pays, and the Baal Habor doesn't have to pay anything. So what's the Rabbanan's opinion? Avol Rabbanan Basar Meikara Azli, the Rabbanan hold that we have to follow Meikara, we have to follow how the damage initiated. Vesavri the Baal Hashor Kula Hezek Oven, and so therefore they hold that the owner of the shore is considered to be responsible for the entire damage. Hilkach b'muad, therefore let's say the shore is a muad, Baal Hashor Meshalim Kule, then the Baal Hashor would pay everything. Uvitam Baal Hashor Meshalim Palga, and by a tam the Baal Hashor would pay half. Upalga mafsid, the other half would be lost. Again, according to the Rabbanan, the Baal Habor doesn't have to pay anything. And now Rashi applies that to our Mishnah. V'gami masnisa nami. Now we said that our Mishnah follows Rabbi Nassan, but in our Mishnah's case as well, Basar Kora Azlina, we would actually say that we follow the person doing the digging. He initiated the damage. He, of course, is pater because it's considered indirect. Ushneim patur, and according to the Rabbanan, they would actually both be pater. The Baal Habor would also be pater. That's what Rashi is pointing out. Our Mishnah follows Rabbi Nassan. That's why the Baal Habor is chayiv. But if it followed the Rabbanan, the Baal Habor would be pater. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Amar Rava says, Hiniach Evan al pi habor. If somebody puts a stone by a pit, uva shor v'niskal ba, and then a shore comes and trips over the stone, v'nafal babor, and falls into the pit, bonu lemachlokas Rabbi Nassan v'Rabbanan. That's the exact same machlokas Rabbi Nassan and the Rabbanan. That's the equivalent of another shore pushing the shore into the pit. And so in that case, again, according to the Rabbanan, it's the person who put the stone who is responsible, not the owner of the pit. And Rabbi Nassan says that they share in the responsibility. Rashi explains, banu lemachlokas l'Rabbanan balho even chayiv. According to the Rabbanan, the person who put the stone there is chayiv. The who garam kol nefila. He caused everything to happen. Umishum grama b'nizak and lekal miftara. Here we don't apply grama. Here it's not considered indirect. It's considered direct. The even nami hainu bor, because an evan's considered a bor. V'hazekiv v'yadayim hu. That's an active damage. Kedetanya paragimel hamadome lazeh avno v'sakino. That's what it says earlier. It talks about the fact that placing an evan that's similar to bor. Well, Rabbi Nassan ben shnei mishalmi. And again, according to Rabbi Nassan, they're both both going to share in the responsibility. They're both going to have to pay. It's the same machlokis Rabbi Nassan and the Rabbanan. And the Gemara says, Pshita, well, isn't that obvious? The Gemara says, not necessarily. Ma'u d'tema, what might you have said? Hasam hu da'amar bal habor lebal hashor. Over there, the person who owns the boar can say to the bal hashor, ilav bira didi torah didach havekata le. He could say, if not for my boar, so your shore would have actually killed this other shore. Your shore would have done the same exact damage without the boar, and therefore you have such a claim. Aval hacha, but over here, matzi amar le bal evan lebal habor. Here, on the contrary, the owner of the stone can tell the owner of the pit, ilav bira didach, if not for your pit, avna didi, my have avda, what would my stone have done? He have a miskalba, have enough of a kai. If he just tripped over a stone, he would fall and get right up. So kamash malan, so it's coming to teach us we don't make these distinctions. It's considered exactly the same. To Amar Le, because he can say to him, ilav evan, if not for the stone, lo have enough of labira, this animal would not have fallen into the pit. And the Gemara says, Itmar, it was stated, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis.